We're in the fourth quarter of Thursday Night Football. At the same time, over in New York, Yankees Red Sox were played in the divisional series, a deciding game, and Aroldis Chapman stepped on the mound in the ninth inning for the Red Sox. His team lost. Red Sox lost. It was his last appearance of the season, and it was one of the greatest reliever seasons of all time, in my opinion. It was about 65 innings, including the postseason, and he had an ERA of something like 1, give or take. It was incredible. What's even more incredible is that it was a career year for him. He's 37 years old, born in February of 1988, and also born in February 1988 is Matthew Stafford. You were wondering where I was going with this. Two guys, 37 years old. They should not be having career years at 37. Only Tom Brady is allowed to have a career year at 37, or maybe Peyton Manning. It's very unusual for someone to be at their best at that age, regardless of the sport. Stafford is now flirting with 20 fantasy points a game, and it's something he hasn't even reached since 2019. And in 2019, he only played half a season. And that's how he broke 20 fantasy points per game. Who knows what would have happened if he played the whole season? The only other time he had broken 20 fantasy points in a season per game, was in 2011. I think it was like his first or second full season in the league, when he had Calvin Johnson, for example. He was Mr. Durable for the succeeding years, but he was always kind of a Tony Romo-esque fantasy player. He was always good. He was someone that you would draft late in rounds. He might get you that very good season, but he wasn't going to get you an awful season. There was just kind of this safety net you had with Matthew Stafford. And then in 2019, when he had that, almost career year, except he got hurt halfway through, that was when the injuries started piling up. And even when he's played most games in a season, he's still kind of been nicked up. There's still been a lot of questionable tags. Or in the preseason, he's kind of battling something, a back issue or whatever. And then it gives people like me pause to go, I don't know if I want to invest in Matthew Stafford. He seems risky. That's always kind of the feeling I've had with Stafford over the last 3 years. He seems risky. And in fact, last season, on fantasy points per game, I think it was like 13.4. He had the second fewest fantasy points per game of any starting quarterback who was not benched during the season. The only one who was worse was C.J. Stroud. So, pretty inauspicious, kind of stat there. 13.4, second to worst. They're not going to start anyone else over him, although Jimmy Garoppolo, could potentially, started. But it's still at Stafford's team. And what he's shown this year is that he's not done yet. And I was thinking he was done. I was thinking that last year was kind of part of that decline. Maybe he'd tick up a couple points, average 15, 16 points per game. But that's not the case. He's just around 20. He's on pace for, well over 30 touchdown passes. His QB rating is now hovering in the top 20 of all time, which is astounding, except he does have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, a 32-year-old Devontae Adams, but still, one of the best wide receivers of now and one of the best wide receivers of the last 10 years on the same team. Not bad. Trading out a declining Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams has turned out to be a genius move for Rams management. So the question then becomes, is Matthew Stafford potentially a league winner? Is this team built for him to have that same beautiful safety net, that great floor that he had throughout the 2010s, essentially, that you could always count on him, more or less, to average 17 or so fantasy points per game plus? That's kind of a solid baseline. And even though we've seen a lot more dual threat quarterbacks now, as opposed to when Stafford broke into the league, and that means that in addition to, high pass rates, you have more fantasy points per game from more quarterbacks. You can average 20 points per game and be the, seventh or eighth best fantasy quarterback these days. It needs to be that way. But still, you can't argue with the fact that through the first 5 games, Stafford has been a terrific starting fantasy quarterback. Watching him, it makes sense. I didn't understand it, how this could be possible this summer. This will be a short podcast. It's really more of throwing it out there to you all. If you have any thoughts on Matthew Stafford that are thoughtful beyond what I've just shared, I'm sure there are plenty out there. This is my immediate reaction after the game. Please share it. Please email. Please join the fantasy football community online. Thousands of people, all that stuff. But it is pretty remarkable because there's no indication, barring an injury, that Stafford is going to collapse because he has that solid receiver core, because he has those 2 guys, Nakua and Adams, who seem to be locked in with him. And the defense is not good enough for them to just turn the ball over to the running game in the second half, game after game, or, even in the fourth quarter. So again, Stafford, it seems to be one of those people that I'm wondering, well, should I, if you need a quarterback, if you don't have a top 10 quarterback, do you try to trade for him in a league where he's rostered? Or is that really trading too high? Is that asking, giving away too much for a 37-year-old who it seems can't be much better than he is right now? It's not like he's going to average 25 fantasy points per game this year. So this is kind of the final thoughts that I have on this, is that it seems that if you want Matthew Stafford, this is the peak that you're going to get at 37 years old, what we've seen so far. And so you have to understand the fact that you have to be okay with 17 points per game, that if he descends back into that realm, as opposed to, 20, as long as you're okay with that, he's a great investment. But if you're expecting the continuation or even increase in points, that really scares me. Not just because he's 37, but also because his track record has been that he hasn't been that explosive talent. And it's very hard for me to understand, despite what we've seen, that Matthew Stafford's suddenly going to have a sustainable career year at age 37. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog, email me anytime. We'll see you tomorrow.